Welcome back to Beauty and the Beasts, where the world of beauty meets the darkest corners of folklore, mystery, and the supernatural. I'm Megan, and while we are doing some skincare tonight, I'm going to tell you a strange story. It's about something that crawls out of the woods when the sun goes down. Tonight, I'm taking you deep into the mountains of Korea, into a real-life encounter with something ancient, something that knows who you miss the most. This is the story of Min-jun and what followed him home from the forest. So turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and get ready because this story, it's going to follow you long after it ends. Let's get started. Have you ever followed a voice, not just any voice, but someone you love? You take just one step because you trust it, and yet that one step might be the last you ever take. Tonight's story comes from deep in the mountains of Gangwon Province, South Korea. It's based on a real experience shared by a Korean guy named Min-jun, and what happened to him will make you think twice about answering when someone calls your name in the dark. Min-jun's maternal grandparents lived near Cheongsan, one of the most remote and mountainous regions in Korea. Even today, when people think of Cheongsan, they imagine winding valleys, endless trees, and villages where time seems to have stopped. Every visit was like stepping into a different world, a world without city lights, traffic, or even proper roads. Instead of paved streets, there were narrow cement paths cutting between rice paddles, splitting off into soft dirt trails that led who knows where. And at night, the dark was complete. There weren't many streetlights, sometimes none at all. But strangely, it wasn't scary because above you, the stars would shine so bright and so many, it felt like the sky itself was falling. It was peaceful, quiet, pure. But not everything about this place sat right with Min-jun. There was one thing, one story that always lingered in the back of his mind. A warning his mother had repeated every time he visited. Once the sun sets, don't go toward the mountain. And no matter what you hear, no matter who calls you, don't answer. And at first, Min-jun just brushed it off. Just an old wives' tale, probably made up back then when people didn't have phones or GPS. And after all, getting lost in the mountains back then could easily mean never being found. So he figured it was just a cautionary tale, something to scare kids into staying safe. But in the summer of 2010, Min-jun would learn just how real the warning was. He hadn't been to his grandparents' home in a year. This time, he was visiting to pay respects on a memorial day of his late aunt. The whole family had gathered, and his grandmother was the first to greet him with a warm smile. "You're here. Come in, come in. How have you been, Grandma?" It was the kind of welcome that made the long journey feel worth it. And after exchanging hugs and catching up, Min-jun stepped outside to take in the familiar calm of Cheongsan. The breeze, the mountain air, the sense that here, in this quiet village, the world's chaos simply couldn't reach him. And there weren't many households in the village, just a small, close-knit community. So naturally, Min-jun found himself exchanging greetings with just about everyone. That afternoon, one of the elders asked him to run a quick errand to town. They needed some hardware supplies, a hammer, nails, odds and ends. And normally his aging grandmother would have had to make the trip herself, so Min-jun gladly offered to take the car into the township. He picked up the items, grabbed a coffee, and began the drive back. But by the time he was winding through the mountains again, the sun was already starting to dip behind the ridges. In the city, it might have still been daylight, but in the mountain village like Cheongsan, the sun disappears fast, shadows stretch long, light fades quickly. As Min-jun was making his way back through the narrow winding roads, he approached a small bamboo grove at the edge of the village. It was one of the darkest stretches of the road. No lights, no reflectors, nothing but his headlights cutting through the trees. So he gripped the wheel tighter, fully focused. Then something white darted across the road, like fast. Minjun slammed the brakes. What the hell? His heart jumped. A cold sweat broke out across his back. At first, he tried to brush it off. After all, this was the mountains. Wild animals roamed freely, maybe a deer or a stray dog. But then he heard something. A voice, soft, familiar. Minjuna. He froze. Minjuna. It was coming from the bamboo grove. So clearly, it was as if the voice passed right through the car door into his ears, like not muffled, not distant, clear, and unmistakable. And it was her voice, his late aunt, the one who had always been cheerful, full of life. He had loved her so dearly, followed her everywhere as a child. Losing her had been so painful. So at first, he thought maybe it was just in his head, a memory, a trick of the mind brought on by grief. But then the voice spoke again, this time trembling. Minjuna, help me. That's when Minjun did something he never thought he would. He stepped out of the car. In any other situation, he would have been too afraid to move, like too shaken to do anything but drive home. But this time, it wasn't like something took over, like something gently reached into his chest and pulled him forward, one step, then another. His feet began to move on their own toward the bamboo grove, toward the voice. And the bamboo grove was deathly still. And by now, night had completely swallowed the sky, and the only thing guiding Minjun was the pale, cold light of the moon. Its glow barely reached through the thick stalks of bamboo, which swayed with the wind in slow, uneasy rhythms. But tonight, even the wind sounded strange, like louder, harsher, like the bamboo wasn't just rustling, but groaning. At the entrance to this grove, there was a narrow footpath, one that villagers rarely used. The ground was overgrown with knee-high grass, the kind that brushes against your legs and makes you want to turn back. But Minjun didn't turn back. And for some reason, he pushed through, deeper into the forest. And then, without warning, everything went silent. The moment he stepped fully into the grove, the wind stopped. The bamboo no longer moved. Even the constant chorus of crickets, frogs, and buzzing insects, gone. This was Gangwon, a mountain village. At night, you would normally hear a symphony of bugs. It was never quiet, but now it was like the entire forest was holding its breath. Minjun felt the air shift, cold, heavy, pressing against his skin. Still, he kept walking, one step, then another, each footfall loud in this eerie silence. After about 15 minutes of walking, he reached a small clearing. In the center of it, something was standing. He couldn't see clearly. The moonlight was faint and the shape was just a blur at first. But as his eyes adjusted, he made out the form of a woman, dressed in white with long dark hair that spilled over her shoulders. She wasn't moving, just standing, facing away. Minjun's voice trembled. Who's there? The woman didn't turn, but she answered, Minjuna. That voice, that same voice he had heard on the road. And he knew it couldn't be her. She had passed. He'd been at the funeral. He had wept. And yet he felt pulled toward the figure, as if in a trance, like a moth drawn to flame. Then the woman began to move, slowly walking away, deeper into the forest. Minjun followed. He couldn't stop himself. His feet moved on their own. They walked like that for what felt like 20 minutes, though it could have been longer. Time didn't feel real anymore. Then, just as suddenly as she had started, the woman stopped. Minjun stopped too. And in a soft, chilling voice, she said, "Just a little farther. I'm so glad to see you." And that's when something in Minjun's mind snapped. No, he thought, I shouldn't go any farther. But his body wouldn't listen. It was like his limbs weren't his own. And then a crackling spark. His phone, hidden in his pocket, suddenly sparked violently. It flashed, hissed, then popped like a firecracker. The screen shattered. The heat surged through his palm. Startled, Minjun dropped his phone. But despite the explosion, Minjun's phone flashlight was still on. Trembling, he bent down and picked it up. The light quivered in his hand, and so did he. And it was only then that reality crashed back into him. What the hell am I doing out here? His breath caught in his throat. Something was very wrong. Every instinct in his body was screaming it now. And that's when she started to turn, slowly. The woman, if you could still call it that, began rotating her head toward him. Minjun's breath hitched. He staggered back. What is that? Her face had no eyes, just two deep, gaping holes where they should have been. Dark red streaks oozed down her pale, cracked skin, and her mouth was torn unnaturally wide, ripped all the way to her ears in a grotesque, blood-stained grin. Minjun screamed. Stumbling, he began to back away, step after trembling step. And that's when she spoke again. Her voice was low, sharp, almost mocking. "Why are you running?" Before he could even blink, she lunged. Minjun turned and ran, faster than he ever had in his life. He didn't look back. His lungs burned. His heart thrashed in his chest. He couldn't tell if he was awake or trapped in some living nightmare. Every cell in his body was screaming the same word: run. So he sprinted through the bamboo grove like a madman, branches whipping his face, thorns tearing at his arms. He tripped over a root and went crashing down, slamming into the dirt hard, rolling once, twice, but there was no time to feel pain. He scrambled up and kept going. That sound, the bamboo stalks behind him swaying, parting, and something was following him, fast. Minjun's flashlight flickered with every bounce, the only thing piercing through the pitch-black trail. Downhill now, he half ran, half fell, his shoes slipping in the mud. He couldn't stop. He was panting so hard, it felt like his lungs were going to burst. And then, just as the trees began to thin, just as the edge of the grove came into sight, a voice called out again. But he didn't listen. Minjun burst out of the grove, his body covered in scratches and sweat, and dove into his car. Chest heaving, fingers shaking, he jammed the keys into the ignition and turned them. The engine roared to life. Without looking, he slammed the gear into reverse. He had to get away. But then his eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror. And there, in the mirror, he saw it. That thing, pale, covered in white fur. A face like some eyeless beast, grotesque and snarling. It was still watching him, still smiling. Still shaking, Minjun drove like a man possessed, back toward home, back toward safety. And as he neared the village entrance, headlights sweeping over the familiar stone path, he saw someone waiting by the roadside. It was his grandmother, bent slightly with age, wearing her usual cardigan. She stood alone at the edge of the village, looking out. "Minjuna, hurry, come here." She called out the moment she saw him, waving urgently. Minjun slammed the brakes and jumped out of the car, the engine still running, and he ran toward her without thinking, relieved, overwhelmed. But something didn't feel right. His steps slowed. Wait, Grandma's out here? Alone? Earlier that very day, someone had mentioned how her back had been acting up again, that she couldn't stand for long without pain. And no one would have let her come out at this hour, in the cold, by herself. And then Minjun saw it, her hand. It was twisted, bent backward at an impossible angle, like a broken doll's limb, bent at the joint in a way no human body ever should be. His stomach turned. This wasn't her. This wasn't his grandmother. The figure started walking toward him, faster now. It was unnatural, jerky, almost twitching. Minjun stumbled back. He didn't say a word. He turned and sprinted to the car, heart slamming in his chest, jumped into the driver's seat, threw it into gear, and floored it. The tires squealed against the gravel. The thing that had pretended to be his grandmother lurched forward. But at the last second, it twisted its body with inhuman speed and darted away from the vehicle. That was no elderly woman. That was something else. Minjun didn't stop driving, didn't dare looking back. He tore down the village road, headlights bouncing as the car surged forward. And then a light, then two, then a row of warm yellow windows glowing in the night. Home. Minjun slammed on the brakes and jumped out, running up to one of the lit houses. He didn't even know which one. He just needed someone. He burst inside. Hey, isn't that Seongja's grandson? An elderly neighbor recognized him instantly, saw his disheveled hair, his pale face soaked in sweat. What happened? But Minjun couldn't answer. His knees gave out and he collapsed onto the floor. And after that night, Minjun was bedridden for days. He burned with fever, sweating through his sheets, tossing and turning, mumbling the same words over and over in his sleep. Not there. Don't go there. Don't go. His family watched over him, worried sick. It wasn't until the third day that his fever finally broke. He woke up pale, confused, and exhausted, but alive. A few days later, his uncle came to visit. He waited until they were alone, then sat beside him and spoke quietly. There is something you should know. There's a creature, like a ghost, they say. It lives deep in the mountains. They say it can mimic voices, especially the voices you miss the most. I've never seen it myself, but what you saw, it might have been Jangsanbeom. Minjun didn't speak. He didn't have to. The name sent a chill straight down his spine. Jangsanbeom. The legend of a mountain-dwelling beast. It cries like a woman, speaks like someone you love. It lures you into the forest, and once you follow, you're never seen again. And as it turned out, this village had its share of disappearances. An old man who'd gone to gather herbs, a couple who went out for a quiet walk one evening. Gone. Since then, villagers always warned visitors, never go into the forest at night. And if someone calls your name from the woods, don't answer. Years passed, Minjun's grandmother eventually passed away, and the family moved out of the village. But Minjun, he never forgot. Even now, he doesn't know what he saw that night. Was it a ghost? Was it really Jangsanbeom, that creature of myth and nightmare? He doesn't have the answer. But sometimes when the nights are too quiet, when sleep doesn't come easily, the memory creeps back and he hears the voice again, soft, familiar, Minjuna. And he remembers how close he came to never coming home. And that is the end of today's story. Like, wow, that was fierce. Seriously, imagine being called by the voice of someone you love, like your family, your mom, only to find that this thing waiting for you in the dark is something else. So have you guys ever heard of Jangsanbeom before? It's one of Korea's most terrifying urban legends. So this name comes from Jangsan, a mountain in Busan where the first sightings were reported, and Beom meaning tiger or beast. So this creature is said to be tall, over 2 meters, with long white fur and eerily human-like movements. But its horrifying ability, it mimics voices, like perfectly. They say it hides in the mountains or forests and calls out using the voices of your loved ones. A mother's voice, a missing child, a friend who's long gone. It uses that voice to lure people in, to make them take just a few steps deeper into the dark. And once you're close enough, you never come back. Some say it devours its victims. Others believe it drags them to another world. Either way, in Korean folklore, the Jangsanbeom is a symbol of deception and longing, a creature that preys on your deepest desires and grief. And that's why even today, older Koreans will warn you, if you hear someone calling your name in the mountains, don't answer. So, what do you think Minjun saw that night? A ghost, a hallucination, or was it really the Jangsanbeom? Let me know in the comments, and if you have ever heard a strange voice in the woods, maybe think twice before you follow it. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never answer the call from the shadows. Goodbye.